Hi, I'm Simon Hunt, an author and consultant, a parent of two delightful children aged 8 and 5. I'm a year 3-4 teacher at Tottington Primary School. And today I'm delighted to be hosting this TTS Talking Little Lockdowners question and answer session, where we'll be exploring ways to better support the social and emotional well-being of children post-pandemic. I'm joined by Hugo Shephard, founder and managing director of Role Models, an education provider that aims to give children the toolkit to build their confidence, manage their emotions, and develop friendships. Hugo and I will be exploring ways to support children's mental health and well-being post-pandemic and beyond. Thanks for joining us today, Hugo.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. Great to be here.
Now, I've got some great questions for you today, and I've got an extra bonus 3 questions, but we'll talk about that towards the end. But first of all, can you just explain the work that you do and the positive outcomes you get from the children that you work with?
As you've just said, our real focus is on trying to give children, 5 to 13-year-olds specifically, the toolkit to build their confidence, manage their emotions, develop friendships, and overall support their social and emotional well-being. We just consider that more important, essentially, than anything else. We want to ensure that kids are happy. And we do this through fun, online and in-person learning, delivered by our friendly, experienced role models who we train in our content, and then they run courses and sessions for kids, always in person, always live and interactive.
That's great. Thank you, Hugo. Have you noticed a shift in children's mental health and well-being since the pandemic?
Yes, sadly we have, and it's no great surprise that it's not particularly gone in the right direction. We hear this from, I suppose, a lot of parents and teachers who we talk to. The main issues seem to be around things like separation anxiety at the school gate is a big one since pandemic, and then also the other theme that we keep hearing is around children maybe struggling a little bit to interact with each other as much, to share things, to be friendly with each other in the playground, just because they've not been with other kids for such a long time. So those are the main things we hear. Also some really interesting data from a mental health charity called Place to Be, which does a big survey on teachers all around the country, and their data, it says that I think 95% of school staff have witnessed increased levels of pupil anxiety. 86% have witnessed an increase in low self-esteem. So yeah, sadly it doesn't seem to have been a good period, and now it's a case of us looking forward, being positive, and trying to support the problem going forward, making things better.
And I think, Hugo, it's the work that you guys do that really do help with that, because, I mean, as a teacher, those statistics do not surprise me one bit. I mean, I've seen that firsthand in school. And if you consider that, things about sharing and children's communication and language together, because some children, if you think those children in year 1 now, if they would have started school in nursery, reception year 1, they've not had a normal year yet. So all they've known is the high percentage of their life has been pandemic and not being with other children. And I think the more we do to sort of tackle that head on, the better. But also those children, for example, my kids are year 4, so they've not had a normal post-pandemic year, normal year since year 1, some of them reception. So it's, I really have seen that, and we've got to really focus on the children's well-being. But also, do you know what you said about the separation anxiety with children? I think it's parents as well. I've seen parents struggle, because as a parent, I got quite used to being with my 2 kids for. I absolutely loved it, and I think there was some positives on that side, because my daughter, she learned to ride her bike during the pandemic, so there were some positives. So when we went back to school, I was a little bit anxious because I'd spent so much time with my 2 kids. And then I'm now going back to school. And I think I felt it as well. And I could see it in the children. And I also felt it from my own children. So I think it's great what you guys are doing. And I just hope that, yes, the pandemic's been a negative thing, but we could really learn from these lessons going forward and tackle well-being head on, and then continue with this, because I don't think there's ever been a conversation around well-being as much as it is right now. And yes, that's because of the pandemic, but we need to keep that and roll with it and keep it going forward, and really be open about how we feel, basically.
Definitely. And I think hopefully we're coming out of this pandemic, and hopefully there won't be another one in our lifetimes, but there'll definitely be other, difficult situations, uncertainty in everyone's lives. And so getting that social and emotional well-being in a good place is just good for everything. I don't think we can just think about this as as now a pandemic issue that we need to solve and then we just hang up our boots. I think it's something that's got to be ongoing.
I completely agree. Looking at from what you've seen, what trends or patterns have you seen emerged, and what do you think teachers, parents, caregivers, grandparents, what do we all need to be aware of short term, but also long term going forward?
Growth mindset is a term that's was used pre-pandemic, and now I think, as you say, there's bigger emphasis on social and emotional well-being, and it's becoming a bigger thing. And I think that's a great thing. I suppose the big theme that we keep seeing is that people use the term, and it's a bit of a buzzword, but maybe children don't necessarily know how to apply it, don't know how to actually do it in real life, what it means with regards to how they interact with their friends or their siblings, or what happens if they don't get in the sports team that they wanted to. So I think that's a theme. Is great that growth mindset's on the agenda, but let's all get together and work out how to actually apply it and make sure it's useful. The other theme that we've seen quite a lot is, I think quite understandably, children feel that perhaps sometimes like the COVID's kind of happened to everyone and there's not anything anyone could do about that. And I think there's a lot about trying to regain a sense of self-agency for kids. They know that actually they can respond to the challenges that happen to them. It's the world doesn't just happen to them. They can control what their next thoughts, what their next action are, and they can influence what happens next in their life. And I think that's a really important point that that parents, teachers, grandparents, as you say, have got to try and support children with going forwards.
Thank you, Hugo. How do we address some of the current challenges with regard to children's mental health and well-being? So what can we do? What strategies do you think, okay, what could we do now straight away as teachers and parents, and what can we do in the future? What little things, like little takeaways that we could do?
Yeah, I think a really quick and easy one for schools is prioritise well-being. We talked about, hopefully it is going up the agenda, but I still feel like parents, schools invest a huge amount of time, effort, resources into swimming or tutoring or sports clubs. There was the tutoring top-up fund, wasn't there, that's still ongoing. And I don't really feel like the same amount of investment and time is given to well-being. And I think sometimes that's because, or my theory is, it's because people don't necessarily know how to do it. They feel like well-being or soft skills is something that you just implicitly develop through life, which you definitely do. But I think there needs to be much more effort given to explicitly teaching those skills. So prioritizing them is one big thing. We can help children develop their emotional literacy a lot, so they can identify, talk about the emotions they're feeling, whether that's anger or jealousy or frustration. That's definitely something we can help children with, because that's the cause of so much angst and anxiety. Because so much of well-being stems from the foundations of this around sleep and sleeping well, eating well, exercising well, which we hear quite a lot. And hopefully children are getting that consistent message. But I think like a well-being fact each day at schools about the impact of, eating tomatoes or getting 8 hours sleep or whatever it is, that comes from the teacher and it's drip fed the whole time. I think screen time is another big one. I think that can really help to put those foundations in place for children. And then there's so much good can come on top of that. But if you don't have those foundations in place, if children are eating badly, if they're spending hours and hours on screens, it's more difficult to get them to a good place.
Thank you, Hugo. And I think going back to what you said earlier, so I think with wellbeing, I think as a teacher, the children have to see that modeled. So we talk about children being kindness and being nice to each other and talking about feelings. And I think I always make a point in classes doing that as a teacher, especially because, I mean, as a male primary school teacher, there's not that many of us. So some of the children don't often see male primary school teachers as often as they do female primary school teachers. So when I'm stood, I'm 6'3", really, well built and muscly and stuff. And they see me talking about my emotions and being talking about kindness and how important that is. And I think when I talk about emotions, talk about kindness, it drip feeds into the kids. So then these children, because they've seen it modeled, they'll talk about, well, if Mr. Hunt's okay with it. It's just like the growth mindset thing. So making mistakes, how that's fine. It's quite often I'll make mistakes on purpose in class and go, oh guys, well, I've just made a mistake. It's all right, don't worry about it, we can get over it. I mean, I think they really do need to see it modeled. And I think just this leads me to the next question. So what do you think we need to, what support is there, and what does support look like for teachers, for educators to be able to do that and to be able to really embed well-being throughout the school and the curriculum?
I think you're spot on there with the modeling. I think it's such an important point. And because it's such a different feel, isn't it? Like modeling something to someone so they pick it up and they don't even realize you're doing it, rather than telling them things. I think teachers are probably much better at that than parents, because parents haven't necessarily been taught that. I think there's loads of parents out there who are so desperate to be great parents, and they're trying to help their children develop these different skills. And the natural tendency with all these things is to just tell someone what to do or how to do it. And I think when we think back to when we were kids, you just react a lot better if you're not being told what to do, but you just happen to notice it from people. In terms of the answer to your question, what support do I think we need for educators? I think the big one, going back to the point around trying to build the foundations, is I think teachers themselves make sure that their mental health is really good, they're in a really great place, they've got a good awareness of resilience, for example, for themselves. I think that's a great starting point, a bit like the whole, make sure you put your own oxygen mask on before you help those around you. You've got to be in a great place before you can help the children. I think better training for training input on how to develop these types of skills in children. As I was saying earlier, I don't think teachers haven't necessarily been taught how to do that. I know it's really interesting actually, during the pandemic, there was a Teach First group that was set up. It was for primary school teachers around wellbeing, because there was a lot of teachers there who were sort of saying, I've been taught how to be a teacher, but I haven't. I'm become like a quasi counselor, psychologist, and I don't necessarily know how to do this. So they put together, they got this, I think it was a Facebook group, Teach First teachers, to try and give each other some support and ideas and tips on how to do that. So I think better training would help enormously. Again, it comes back to prioritizing this. And then I suppose where schools need external support from other organizations who specialize in this, I suppose organizations like us, then they should reach out and try and get that support, because you're just never going to be experts in everything, and this is quite a complex, difficult space at times.
Completely agree, Hugo, because I mean, from the start of the pandemic, so I remember in March 2 years ago, the pandemic hit, and as teachers it was very quick. So it was like boom, and we just thought, it's going to be a week too. And then the stress on teachers, it was quite difficult. And then in the media, teachers were used as a bit of like as a tool to talk. And some people saying, my children are going into school, and it was a really difficult balance, because I was a parent and a teacher. And at the start, the way we kind of dealt with supporting teachers was like we had like extra chocolate in the staff room at first, which is great. And don't get me, I love chocolate, and that was fantastic. But there was a definite shift from the beginning towards the end of the first. Let's get some treats, let's look. But then at the end, well, yeah, that's great. A little bit of chocolate's fine. But what we actually really doing, like you said, to do with the sleep, to do with how people are feeling, I saw a definite shift from teachers openly talking about feelings and how they feel on Facebook groups and Twitter. You saw that more often. And I think that needs to, now we're post-pandemic, we need to keep hold of that open sort of communication, that open collaboration with people and teachers and with guys like you, Hugo, and the things that you guys do, and keep it going forward, because it was always there before. We just needed a pandemic to sort of go, right, this is the thing we need to think about ourselves first. Because like I've said before, when you as a teacher, when you're stressed out or you're worried about stuff, the kids feed off that and they spot it straight away. And sometimes they don't, sometimes they're like, it'll impact your lesson. So if you're worried and you're stressed out as a teacher, or you're having problems, and it feeds off the kids and it has a negative impact upon them. So like you said, with the oxygen mask, unless the teacher's breathing, then you can't expect to, pass the oxygen mask around to the rest of the children. So I definitely think it's something that we need to continue with. And this brings me to the investment side. So what future investment in education is best to support children's well-being and teachers as well?
I think a big one is just an increased proportion of the budgets, going towards social and emotional well-being. It's got to be a conscious decision there from head teachers or bursars to put more time, effort, and resources into that. So I think that's just got to be a big one. We've just got to grab hold of this opportunity now and embed it. And from a budget point of view, if that's in the budget every year, it's so much easier for that, more difficult even for that to shift than trying to get it in every year. And it needs to become a consistent part of schools budgeting, schools thinking. I'd also love the idea of for slightly older children, for 14 and upwards, there's got things like Duke of Edinburgh, where they have effectively like a point system, and you get bronze, silver, gold, and you're rewarded for what you do, non-academic work in the community, and other things you do. And I think there's a real opportunity for younger kids, some sort of tracking point system where children get rewarded for the time they spend and they invest in life skills and personal development. And perhaps that can continue on. It can even link up with Duke of Edinburgh, so that when they're applying for their next school or their university or whatever they end up going and doing, that's recognised, that the time they've put into their personal development, rather than just being able to show, I got A's or B's or whatever in maths and English. So I'd really like that to be implemented, to make it more of a tangible thing almost, because the other big issue with what we're talking about here is it's so intangible, isn't it? It's so difficult to measure, and therefore I think sometimes it gets put to one side because of it just being difficult.
I think so. With what you said there, Hugo, so with the investment in education, when you mentioned teachers as well, so I think what we need to is in education in general. So we see the budget, and a budget's always a problem. So how do we pay? What do we use this budget for to help teachers? But if you think about it in a roundabout way, if a teacher struggles and is off with stress, then you've got supply teachers, which will eventually cost more than what the budget would have been in the first place. So it's in a roundabout way. You've got to solve the problem before it happens, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So prevention rather than cure.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Right. How do you think future approaches need to be adapted to create a more inclusive learning environment?
I think actually a big thing here, as you mentioned earlier, if we can create a classroom environment that really focuses on empathy and caring for others, make that kind of fashionable, make that cool, and that's got to come from teachers like yourselves. If that can be something that becomes the culture in the classroom, then I think that's amazing. I think if children can empathise with, if there's a really mixed diversity in the classroom, or even if there isn't, that they can understand different points of view, different cultures, different attitudes, then that's such a powerful thing to grow up with. But that's got to be the culture in the classroom. It's got to be one of looking out for someone else who's struggling, who's maybe not so good at maths, or English isn't their first language, and to foster that that environment will help so much, I think, in terms of encouraging learners to help each other.
Completely agree, Hugo, because if you think that we've got now, it's what are we now, June, July. In September, there's going to be a whole new wave of new teachers that will start in September, and also teachers have got their new class. I remember one teacher once said to me, don't smile till Christmas, meaning you have to have this stern face until Christmas. I think if there's any NQT teacher, anyone listen, that is the worst bit of advice you could ever. From day one, you smile straight away, because like you said, from the first day that those children step foot into their new classroom, new teacher, new surroundings, new people, if they see a smile, and it's inclusive because a smile is the same in any language, they feel welcome. And then once you have children, once you show this empathetic side and this, that you care for them, that's the biggest thing that you can do for a child, is you show that you let that child know that you care for them. They will naturally work hard, their hardest in your lessons. If you tell them to work hard in a lesson, they'll do all right. But if you get them to want to show you how hard they're working because they know that you care, and then in turn they care about you, you get so much better results. And yeah, that teacher that said don't smile till Christmas, I hope they're not teaching anymore. But like I said, anyone that's listening, smile from day one. The second that those children see your face, or even beforehand, you smile from day one. But I've got one more. I've got a couple more questions actually, and then I've got some from some experts, some top experts. Now, do you have any ideas for ways to bring PSHE into other areas of the curriculum to offer more opportunities for practice? And what I mean by that is, wellbeing shouldn't be a 15-minute lesson on a Friday just before the kids go home. Like how would you envisage getting PSHE and wellbeing throughout the curriculum and not just a standalone lesson?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it is a tricky one, this. We talk a lot about split screening, so split screen teaching. So if you're teaching maths, for example, and you're, you're doing a bit of algebra or fractions, and you're teaching children about the specific skill they need for that bit of learning, it's just really important to also be talking about the skill attribute that they're developing at the same time. So when they're doing fractions and maybe they're finding it really difficult, they don't understand it, that they're also learning to persevere when they're finding something that's really challenging. And I think to keep highlighting that we're not just focusing on an academic skill here, we're also working on our soft skill. I think that's really important, so that it's not something that's just developed implicitly. We're making it more obvious, we're making it explicit, and then you can also refer to it in other lessons you're doing, other parts of the curriculum. I think that's a really useful technique if you can start doing that as much as possible. I don't know if do you ever find that doable in your classes?
Completely. Like you said, well-being and emotions, and like growth mindset as well. It's not just a 15-minute thing. It's embedded through everything. You do it in every single lesson. You show, as a child, there's nothing worse than if you're in a math lesson, for example, and you get something wrong, and then you've got to show model as a teacher that it's okay to get things wrong. Don't worry about that. Let's work it out together. They've got to see that, and they've got to see that being okay. Because for example, as a kid, I used to absolutely hate spellings, because I'm still not great at spelling. I used to really worry about saying what score I'd got in my spellings. And I think, and I talk about that with my kids. I tell them all the time, my spelling's still not great, but I've written a book. I can still do these things. And so those children that spelling is not, it's not one of their strengths, they go, well, Mr. Hunt can be a teacher, and he can be, and we talk about the tools of how to get around that. And, I think if they see that, and like I said, that again, that's all throughout the curriculum, that's English, math, science, whatever you're talking about, just about that open conversation, and just to show children it's okay to talk about how you feel about something. Because like I said, I always talked about how I really struggled at school in English, and now I've written a book, and now English is one of my favorite lessons to teach, and how emotions do evolve and do change. And I think it's really, really, really important. Now I've got a couple more questions, three more from you, Hugo. So my year, I teach Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and on Friday I do lots of other things, including speaking to you on one of the hottest days of the year in my office. Now my kids are always dead interested. Mr. What are you doing this week? And sometimes I'll go to schools and read my book. Sometimes I'll I'll do a bit of extra homework at home. Sometimes I'll just do nothing and just I'll go swimming. I'll do something, but they're always interested in what I'm doing. And they said, because they know I'm doing some podcasts and talking to very important people. So you're a very important person, by the way, Hugo. And they said they always like to be part of it, and it's nice for them to be part of it. So they've got some questions for you. So like I said, I could have had loads of experts from around the world, but I've decided to get my top experts, which are 3 of my children. So are you ready for this, Hugo? So these are miles better than my questions. This is Harry. So Harry really loves superheroes. Is big into his like Iron Man and Marvel stuff. He's really into that, and he wants to know what skill is the best superpower. What do you think is the best superpower? What skill is the best superpower?
Yeah, so great question. I think soft skill, superpower, I'd say empathy for me is a big one. I think being able to see the world from other people's point of view is just such an amazingly powerful skill. They say it's really good, something that if you do drama or acting, it's a really good way of being able to develop that skill, because you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes. You have to play them in a school play. So I'm a big one for empathy. I think if everyone in the world had a bit more empathy, it would be a lot happier place. But it's a difficult one to embed. But that's my super skill.
I like it, Hugo. So we could maybe like Captain Hugo, Captain Empathy. Empathy defeats the enemy. So there's a book there, Hugo. I think you should get like a mini series there. Right. Okay. Right. I've got another question from Fatima. So Fatima is one of my year 4 girls. I showed them your website and we looked through and they were like, oh, hit play, Mr. We need to find out who you're talking to. Honestly, these guys really do their research, Hugo. They really do. And so your company's called Role Models, and they want to know, who is your role model? And I think it's a really interesting question, this one. Who's your role model?
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to cheat and give 2 answers, actually. Number 1 is Jane Austen, who's she a book author who wrote books like Pride and Prejudice and Emma, and we got to study her when I was at school in our English lessons, and I love the books. They were, I think my English teacher just did an amazing job of bringing them to life and making them fun, but Jane Austen was able to write a book where not all that much happens. It's a love story most of the time, but she just did an amazing job at making it a real page turner. You wanted to find out what happened. You got really into the characters. So yeah, she's my one role model. And then the other one is Nelson Mandela. I've got a South African mum, so I've got some connections over there, and I just think, wow, he was an amazing man. He was one who was able to he was stuck in prison, I think, for about 19, 20 years, and not be angry at the people who put him in prison. And I just think that is an amazing soft skill, to be able to kind of put aside that anger and then look for reconciliation. Yeah, so I've cheated. Those are my 2.
Do you know what? That's absolutely fine, Hugo. You can cheat away. Now, I know now, because my kids are going to watch this, I'm now going to, thank you, Hugo, we've got 4 weeks left. I'm now going to have to do a couple of lessons on Jane Austen and now on Nelson Mandela, which is absolutely fine with me. So we're going to have to look at that next week. Yeah, that's my next lesson. So right. If you can help me with that, with the planning and delivering of that lesson, Hugo, that would be very, very helpful. Right, I've got one last question. He's got a fantastic name, and his name he's called Hugo, which is the name of my son as well. My son's called Hugo, and Hugo, I give all my kids nicknames. 1, because I'm terrible with remembering names, but 2, because nicknames remind me of a child's name. In fact, when I do reports, I always put the nickname in the report. So he's called Schoolgo because he's the Hugo at school, so I call him Schoolgo. Now, Schoolgo's question is this, and I think this is quite a deep and meaningful question. He just asks, what makes you happy?
What makes me really happy is finishing a run. So I was going to say the running bit of it, but actually the running bit of it isn't that enjoyable. It's when you finish that run and you get that post-run kind of lovely buzz and you know it's all over. That's what really makes me happy.
Fantastic, Hugh. And again, that's my one of my lessons next week. So next week we are going to talk about, because this was yesterday, he asked this question. So we're all talking about what makes us happy, and we're going to bring something of significance that relates to that, what makes us happy next week. So that's one of my lessons, because, if the kids are talking about what makes them happy, like you're smiling now, aren't you, Hugo? I can see you smiling. It's because you're talking about running, something you're passionate about. And I think that by giving the children the opportunity to talk about something that makes them happy, it gives them the pedestal to this smile and talk about what makes them happy. And then I'm going to hit them with a mass test straight afterwards. But there we go. I won't do that. Sorry, guys. When they watch this, I won't do this, guys. Honestly, don't worry. But yeah, I think that's a really, I know it's something we should think about all the time, because it's quite, when someone asks you what makes you happy, you go, gosh, what actually does, it's not that this, and it's nice to think, well, I was going through many things in my head, and what makes me happy is the fact that, my kids now at school, they come out, they've really made me as a teacher. So the teacher that I am today is because of the kids that I teach. So if it wasn't for all the kids, I feel privileged and lucky to be able to teach kids. And I'm sure, Hugo, the fact that when you see, it must be so rewarding to see children talking about feelings. And I'm sure you've probably seen where you've had a child that maybe thought they couldn't talk about their emotions and couldn't talk about these things before, that are then opening up, and then it'll open the floodgates with other things and let them more accepting to other new ideas and other thoughts and feelings from a young age to older age. And then hopefully that will go into the future. And as teachers as well, like we said earlier, talking about our feelings and how it's been post-pandemic for us, and how do we feel that it's only going to have a positive effect in the future if we're able to talk about feelings and wellness and put it on a pedestal that it really does deserve.
100%. If we get when we get feedback from parents about a course that their child's gone on, and what they've actually they now do as a result, they're happier to go into school, or they put their hand up more, they've just got more confidence. Those are amazing things to hear, because we don't always necessarily get to hear those. A child does the course and you never really know, because we're not with them day to day, what's been the impact of that. So those testimonials, those parent comments are amazing as well. Just knowing you've had an impact on someone.
And keep making an impact, Hugo. Keep doing what you guys are doing, and keep with all that hard work you're doing, because it really does make a difference to children. And I always think if you help one child, then everything's worth it. So you probably I'm sure you've helped lots and lots of children to really develop and to really talk about their feelings and really how they feel. And it's, well, you're doing a great job, and keep doing what you're doing. I really do appreciate your time, Hugo, and spending your time with us today, talking about lockdown, post-lockdown, and superpowers, and what makes you happy, and all these different types of stuff. And thank you so much. I hope you've had it's really nice to have a chat to you. And I could talk to you all day, Hugo, and ask you, I feel like I want to ask loads of superpower questions and more stuff with you. But I really do appreciate your time, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. It's been great.